The key to investment always is that weighting of risk versus return. I think if you want really, really low risk and moderate return, you're going to come to Halifax all day long. I do think for the investor that prefers a little bit more yield and has a bit of an appetite for risk, I think there's wonderful opportunities all throughout New Brunswick, generally in the three urban centers. Charlottetown has now become really in vogue. A lot of great immigration stories happening there. And if you're a riverboat gambler, St. John's, Newfoundland has lots of opportunities if you look with a bit longer lens, but right now is a great time to buy in St. John's.
When I look at markets in Atlantic Canada as well as all of Canada, I'm looking at the urban markets. So I think all of the urban markets in Atlantic Canada are generally very good. They have solid GDP growth, solid income growth, solid population growth, and generally a younger population. And if you look as a percentage of the population in the provinces, the cities are actually a lower percentage than they are in the rest of Canada. The rest of Canada has 80% of the population in cities. In Atlantic Canada, they're often 30, even 50, 60%. So there's going to be an increasing movement to the cities in Atlantic Canada, like you see in the rest of the country. And so I think those economies are fine. And I think as a whole, you know, we love Halifax, we love Fredericton, we love Charlottetown, we love St. John's. Those markets are all, we think, great markets. Moncton as well, but it's those markets are just the best cities in Atlantic Canada. And I think the main difference is, in addition to the economic and demographic factors I talked about, is liquidity. In those markets, you can get sufficient liquidity for private and then public companies such as Crombie. So for us, those are the markets to look at.
So obviously I'm a little bit partial because, of course, as the CEO of the Halifax Port Authority, I look at cities that have international ports and international airports. That's a starting point. And from my perspective, a city that has one or both, preferably, has a built-in DNA that's very good around the supply chain, around logistics, around transportation. And not only is that a draw for people, it's a draw for business, and it creates that vibrancy that is needed for development around it. So taking that principle and going across the region, cities like St. John's, Newfoundland, St. John, New Brunswick, and of course, Halifax would be three of the areas that would satisfy that criteria. And I think when you look at those three cities, that infrastructure, that transportation infrastructure and the built-in DNA is something that is very important for the vibrancy of the cities.
Yeah, I have to come back to Halifax first. I mean, this is a very dominant market for us, and it continues to perform very well. When you take a look at the region, it's by far the largest city. So I think it'll perform very well. But I'll tell you, in a close second, and last year actually it led, was New Brunswick. Those three cities there, so between Fredericton, Moncton, and St. John, they had a stellar year. Returned NOI gains of roughly 8% on average, whereas Halifax did a little less. But overall, I think that they're fantastic. And PEI. And PEI would have virtually 100% occupancy. In our portfolio, 1,100 units, we'd have less than 1% vacancy. So that's going to be a big performer. The issue there, though, is there's rent control, so you don't get to move rents. So that's what's on. Unfortunately, Newfoundland right now, energy's not doing so well, but I think in the long term it'll come back. It used to be the leader for us in this region, but I'm confident that it'll come back.